All right, Jason, I mentioned Cooper Flagg. He had a big game for Duke over the weekend, once again with 20 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 stocks, 1 assist on Sunday. That follows up a game last week when he had 22 points, 11 boards, 5 stocks, 4 assists against number 2 Auburn. I talked about Cooper Flagg with Tate Frazier on this podcast a few weeks ago about whether anybody could really push him to take the number 1 spot. I think right now Flagg is clearly the number 1. I don't have anybody else in the same tier currently. But I'm curious about your perspective when you watch Cooper Flagg. Do you see him as one of those clear-cut number 1 prospects in a draft class? So with what you've seen so far this season.
I do. I think there's a lot of hand-wringing about little things like some of the scoring production when people, I don't think, realize just how difficult it is to put up giant point totals, especially in a team context when you're playing at the Power 5 level, that sort of thing. And then some of the complaints about his jump shooting. He's 17, and I think he's going to be fine in the long run, at least fine enough. The big thing that stands out to me is he doesn't seem to have any trouble getting to his spots. Like we talked about it earlier with Brandon Miller, at 6'10", he's pretty quick. His start-stop quickness is there. It almost feels like he's playing downhill. Like it feels like he just has got this like burst and the pivoting over both shoulders, the ability to like elevate and hold the ball in 2 hands and disguise where he's going to finish from, depending on where the rim protector goes. We haven't even gotten to the intangible stuff. Like to me, I think his competitive nature and just the way he's wired as a human being is like the kind of thing that every franchise should be scrambling for. I'm like completely sold on him. I understand that there's going to be some growing pains. He's 17 years old. It's going to take some time. There's going to be some stinkers in there, but to me, he looks like a guy who can get to wherever he wants to on the floor, who's got a ton of room for skill improvement in the long run and is wired the right way. So you can't go wrong with him.
I think that's spot on. I mean, that is really my fifth thought from the weekend is that Cooper Flagg continues to prove he's the clear-cut number 1 pick. That's the way I feel about it. I think it was the Auburn game last Wednesday. You mentioned the intangible factor, like the hustle. It's also his awareness. Like for a 17-year-old, his defensive awareness. He had this great help rotation late in the game against Auburn where, I mean, like he's 6'9", 6'10". He looks like Draymond Green helping at the basket. And then he grabs the rebound and he dribbles up the floor himself and he makes this cross-court pass to the left corner from the right side of the floor, and it's just pinpoint pass. His teammate bricked the 3, but it's like just one of these sequences where you're like, okay, elite rim protection as a help defender, elite pass in transition, bringing the ball up himself, and this is a guy who's going to be a connective star. If the skill level as a shooter develops over time, you're talking about a dude that's going to be one of the best players in the league. And if it doesn't, you're still talking about a guy that makes a winning impact in virtually every single category on the floor and can still get buckets. I mean, he's leading Duke in points. He's averaging over 20 at age 17. He's still scoring late in games, even without a reliable jumper. If that comes along, like it's a wrap. He's going to be one of the best players in the league. And if it doesn't, he's still going to impact winning. That's the way I feel with Cooper Flagg. Like there's a high floor with this dude and a high ceiling. You can't say that about anybody else in this year's draft class to the level you can with Cooper Flagg.
He also plays with strength in a way that I think will be leveraged even more when he gets into NBA strength and conditioning for a few years. Like he doesn't get bumped off his spot super easily. He fights for position. He brings physical aggression to every confrontation, whether it's a box out or like just a dude fighting for post position. Like I think he's got a nasty streak. I think he's going to be really good right away.
On that point, Jason, is there a player he reminds you of, past or present? Do you have a comp for him?
Oh my gosh. You know, there were a couple of, this is a bad comp because I think he's a little quicker, but like there were some possessions where it reminded me a little bit of Paolo and his ability to kind of like feel the defender's body and pivot the right way to kind of turn over a different shoulder. And just kind of a little bit of that like downhill power spin game reminded me a little bit of Paolo. But you know how it is. Like with those comps, it's always like a smorgasbord of like 6 different players that turns into who the guy is.
I mean, I think that's one of them that belongs in the bunch. It's like, for me, I have a list of Pascal Siakam, later career Blake Griffin, Andre Kirilenko, Scottie Pippen. Like there's like a big mix of guys you can put together that kind of sort of work for Cooper Flagg. But I can't think of just like one clear-cut name for him. He's a big mix of players.
The Blake Griffin one is interesting to me because he's another guy that like kind of, it almost seemed like the floor was tilted towards the basket when he was making, like it almost feels like he's leaning towards the rim all the time and just everything is attack, attack, attack.
I mean, people forget, like even when Blake Griffin was like a 100th percentile athlete in his prime, but even late career Blake Griffin with the Pistons, like he's a damn good player, man. I love that version of Blake Griffin. So like there's a little bit of that in Cooper.